Well, happy Saturday, folks. The real Captain Kirk here. We're live from One Bethlehem Plaza here in downtown Bethlehem here on the 8th of February. Meteorologists say there's only 21 days left of winter. 1 March is the end of winter, and according to the sun, 40 days until spring arrives. So we're going to go with the sun here because we think it's going to be a pretty stormy March, and in fact, a pretty stormy spring all the way into probably May. Looking at La Niña here, again, it's in a weak phase here, and it's probably peaking as we speak. Again, and it's going to go into a neutral negative phase, but again, just kind of a neutral phase for probably the balance of 2025 here. So lots of other factors. Again, if you just looked at La Niña, you probably missed how cold and snowy it was going to be on the East Coast here this year. And again, if we look at season-to-date snowfall here nationally, only about 18% more than last year. But again, we'll be adding to this big time here with the snowy outlook here. We'll show you here in a few minutes on the next 2 weeks. Looking at season-to-date snowfall trends here across regions. Now, this samples major metropolitan areas, not the high mountains, but even so, the Northwest, at least in 4 years, they picked up some ground this past week, still down 46% versus last year. Southwest, the big loser, down 25, at least in 25 years, down 75% in terms of snowfall. North Central, number one least in over 40 years. A little bit here, but again, down 11%. But again, number one least snow in the North Central. South Central has been up with those earlier storms, up 30%. Southeast, the big winner. Obviously, Florida and the Gulf Coast, the real big winners, most in 14. And here in the Northeast, most in 3 years. But again, we're going to be adding to that big time here in the next couple of weeks here. We look at the snowfall index. These bars show the year-on-year change for snow. So blues are more snow than last year. The dotted blue line here is actually the U.S. snowfall index. So the snowiest week so far this winter has been the 5th through 11th of January. We're going to eclipse that probably here in mid-February around the Valentine's, President's Day type systems here. So again, looking very, very snowy here the next couple of weeks. In fact, the most in 40 years. We'll see. Looking at Great Lake ice coverage here again. Lake Erie is pretty much, it's the shallowest of the lakes, so it's froze over quicker. It's almost 100% coverage there in Lake Erie. That shuts down the snow machine, lake effect. Ontario, not so. So we get a really cold blast. You can still have those big lake effect snows there in New York. Dry to drought phases have surged here. Again, we're now back up to 69% of the country in dry to drought phases. Again, as we've said many times here over the past 6 months, that we believe this will expand to the west, the north, and to the New England areas, and improve, again, probably here in the southeast. So again, drought is going to be one of the themes here for 2025 in our year ahead outlook. Severe weather, not so much. Again, we had an epic season, obviously, last year with tornadoes and wind, and hail was a little bit down, but again, actually the only category we expect to be up this year in 2025 will be hail. Tornadoes we think will be way down from last year, and wind cases probably down as well. Looking at wildfires is the next big thing we think is going to happen here is the worst in 10 years. Recall last year we said it would be the worst in 4, is the worst in 4 after the non-existent season back in 2023. So worst season in 10 years in terms of acres burned, and obviously that already got started here with the California fires. Look at last week, world summer here, ending here today here in the U.S. 2.3 cooler than last year, a little bit of a February thaw, if you will. 6th warmest in 40 years, so above average temperatures. While 25% drier than last year, 10th driest in 40 years, below average. Snowfall was up 267% more than last year, most in 3, 18th most in 40 years. So you don't always have to, you can be warm and still have a fair amount of snow. Really cold there in Canada, 17.9 degrees colder than last year. That's just pretty cold, wall-to-wall cold compared to the really warm conditions a year ago. Maps inset left are the trends versus average. Look at the polar vortex here again. You don't like to see it elongated like this just because it means you get a cross-polar flow from Siberia. So the cold air in Siberia will flow across the North Pole and head into North America, Canada, U.S. So that's what we see is very, very elongated. Normally this would be about half the size of what you see in this depiction here. So again, it's a telltale sign here that we are going to have a coldest, snowiest February in at least 4 years here in the U.S. Look at this week here again. Hard to believe Valentine's Day is here later in the week here, but week ending the 15th. Colder trends starting to emerge as you see that first phase of the polar vortex in the northern plains, New England. 8.2 colder than last year nationally, coldest in 4 years, 13th coldest in 40 years, so below average now national temperatures. Snowfall way up, 150% over last year, most in 4, 7th most in 40 years. And rainfall also way up, 34% wetter, most in 35 years, 2nd most in 40 years. So we'll see here a lot of, there's 5, 6, hard to keep track of how many systems are traversing the U.S. here, but a a lot of snow in the forecast here. We have one system moving across the northern tier here today, here this weekend, and then across New England here, probably the bigger winter here this with 8 to 12 inches from Boston toward Buffalo. And then again, there's another system moving in Monday into the plains, and then that expands into the mid-Atlantic. Timing on this one will be interesting because, again, the models are showing potential for a bigger Valentine's midweek storm here. So we'll see a Wednesday, and then there's another chunk of energy coming in on Thursday. So it's a mess. It's just going to be kind of a nonstop nuisance storm events here. You no sooner clean up, and then you got another one moving in. And if we just aggregate these trends here, so for the 6-day period only here, now this is through the 13th, there's many systems after the 13th. 329% more than last year, most in 11, fourth most in 40 years, so much above average with about 68% of the country getting some snow here. Again, 14-day storm track here is just hard to keep track of here. There's just so many systems traversing the country, and the question is, how do these all exactly phase with upper-level energy and surface energy? But again, the net is a very stormy pattern with cold air in place, so snow for sure. So we'll see here again over the next 2 weeks. In fact, looks like even more here beyond this period into February and even to March. Looking at the President's Day week here, now week ending the 22nd of February here, continues a cold trends, expands kind of central and east. 7.2 colder than last year, coldest in 4 years, 10th coldest in 40 years. So again, below average national temperatures. Snowfall again way up, 321% more than a year ago, most in 10 years, fourth most in 40 years. Rainfall again up, plus 139% wetter than last year, most in 6 years, eighth wettest. Notice the west, though, dries out again. So the stormier week this week, again, drying out. So getting back to their dry pattern. So they had a little bit of moisture here, but way, way below average. In fact, nationally, since about the 1st of October, after Helene and all those hurricanes, since the 1st of October, the U.S. is trending the driest in 25 years. We aggregate these world 2-week trends here now, 9th through the 22nd. So the big theme is cold in North America, Canada, U.S., and a little bit cooling trends there in Central and Eastern Europe. Temperature trends versus last year, inset left there. So much, much colder than the warm February we had a year ago. So it's wholesale change. And look at precip trends here again, stormy again. Just lots of snow and moisture and flooding potentially even in the southeast here. May get some severe weather in this pattern here. We'll see in the deep southeast. But again, not looking for a crazy severe weather season here in 2025. Precip trends versus average inset left there. So, folks, have a great week, and we will talk to you again here this time next week.